All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to go over the principles of defense. Yesterday we covered some of the little bit more esoteric principles of offense. Today we're going to do defense, and probably tomorrow or the next day after that we're going to go over the principles of managing transitions. This is not an exhaustive list. This is a distilled list that I've taken from a larger list of characteristics of offense or defense that are taught at different universities or taught at think tanks when it comes to warfare. And it turns out that they're pretty useful for coaching fighters too. So in my other life, I am a historian. So, this is also informed by sound principles of warfare. So, number one, the purpose of defense is to enable a more perfect offense. And you'll hear people often say, purpose of defense is better offense or whatever. I think this sounds a little bit prettier. Purpose of defense is to enable a more perfect offense. So that means whether you're trying to secure a supply line or whether you're trying to shore up your own defenses, every time you're defending, you should be doing so to prepare to initiate a better offense than the last one that you just deployed. Number two, evasion is more efficient than absorption. Sure, sometimes we get dragged into battles of attrition, but at the end of the day, it is more efficient for you to be able to evade it, not get hit, right? Instead of blocking, it's better to roll, to slip, to move your feet and get out of position, to limit your opponent's ability to hit you well or cleanly by avoiding their center line, right? So evasion is more efficient than absorption. Every time you get hit, it takes both a short-term and a long-term toll on your body, and you should be cognizant of that as you're going through this process. Without offense, defense is defeat. If a place gets invaded and they don't counter-invade or they don't take offensive measures, then the enemy is never going to quit the invasion unless some other external factor intervenes. So this being unfortunately all too relevant in the world that we live in, you have to remember that defense is kind of it's a supplemental, you'll see that later, is supplemental to offense. And it's not a thing that you want or should sustain for any longer than is absolutely necessary. Always be in position to deploy your offense. So when you're defending, you should always be in a position where you can attack. And sometimes that means you have to be on the move. Usually that means you should be on the move so that you're not going to be continually borne down by the opponent or the enemy. So what do? You maintain a plastic or a fluid or a mobile defense so that you're always doing something. Defending in depth, we're about to go over that. You're always doing something to make sure that as soon as you re-engage or as soon as you reinitiate your attack, you're doing so in the best conditions. When in doubt, attack. My coach, Pops, Nate Livermento, he always used to say, when in doubt, punch out. And you know what? At the end of the day, it's better to throw a couple shots and to keep your chin protected while you're doing that than to just shell up and let somebody else bang away on you. It seems obvious, but it's not always obvious when you're in the moment. All right. Always defend in depth. So what does that mean? That means you should have depth in your defense, both in space and in time. So not only am I going to have my hands up is kind of my closest means of protection, right? You can throw a catch, which is a type of parry. You can roll into a block. You can roll away. You can do whatever. You always want to have more than one layer of defense, and that's defense in depth. So your footwork and your passive head movement are generally going to be your first layer of defense. If you can do anything to stall the initiative of your opponent coming forward and attacking you, that's a thing that you can use. Next from your feet are your hands. You can always just put your hand in the way for a parry. You could do a circular parry. You can do a catch. You could do a block. You could do slips. You could do rolls. All of these things, when taken together, from feet to hands to head and body movement, that's defending in depth, in space. To defend in depth in time means you've always got something moving into position to protect you. When you're throwing, a jab, your shoulder's gonna come up into position to protect your chin. When you throw your straight, it's the same thing. And when you use those things in conjunction with your other types of head and hand movements as a way of putting things in between your face and your opponent's weapons, that's defending in time when you do that in succession. So it's like you catch, slip, roll, fire off some other shots. That's defending in depth in time and space. All right, always integrate your defenses. So much in the same vein, as important as it is to defend in depth, you also have to integrate your defenses. So when you're going to be using your feet for defense, if your opponent is closing in, let's say you want to move offline, well, you have to move the feet. But if you're going to be moving to your strong side across your opponent's center line, you've got two things you have to immediately worry about. You have to worry about his left hand, which is probably going to come across as a hook. And so when you're taking that step in, it's generally good to protect and to throw a block. When you arrive into that offline position, the next thing you have to worry about is going to be your opponent's straight or their cross, probably their cross if they don't adjust their feet. So what you have to then be mindful of is, well, what can you do to deter that? So I always recommend throwing just kind of a checking action hook or a chip shot hook while you're crossing the center line. So you roll into the opponent's potential hook that they might be throwing, and you bring your left hook with you. When you do that, now you're throwing a deterrent for that right hand. And then when you get into position, if you have intercepted that opponent lead hook, you can fire off a counter on the inside. I'm gonna put videos up that show all these things too. I just don't have the space and schedule alignment right now, but I'm gonna have videos for each of these things so you can see me doing them, or one of my fighters. So, all right, next. Ground is recoverable, but time is not. So this is straight out of Napoleon. In his mantras of war, that was one of his most important. First was that the temperament of a good soldier is not obedience, but his ability to endure privation. That means like how much suck can he suffer through and still be willing to fight. And then his second law or his second mantra was that you can always recover ground. So if somebody takes some of your land, that's fine. You can always get it back. But time is irrecoverable. You can never get time back. And especially in a fight, when you know you have a specific amount of limited time to achieve your objectives, you have to ensure that that's always in the back of your mind. So you want to own the rounds. You want to own the beginning of the round because that's going to set the way the judges are going to see the rest of the round. And you want to own the end of the round because that's what the judges are going to remember the most. That's kind of like the macro perspective of how you fight through the rounds. On top of that, you also have to look at engagements. And engagement is every time you and your opponent come into range and exchange blows. Some people just call it an exchange. I call it an engagement just because of my experience in the Army and as a military historian. So when you've got two people coming in to exchange blows, the judges are going to remember who hits first, and the judges are going to remember who hits last, and the judges are going to remember whichever of the punches had the most effect. So what you want to do is punch first, punch last, and have the hardest punch or hardest series or most effective series of punches as well as possible in between. Now, when you do that, you get what we had as a principle of offense, which is to dictate the terms of every engagement. So that it all kind of, in one of the other offensive principles I talked about yesterday, all offense and defense are inextricably linked. It means you can't take them apart from each other. There's a reason why these align so closely with the principles of offense. All right, next, know the difference between passive and active defense. Just moving my head while I'm in position and having my hands in a ready position that I can fire, I can protect, I can do all these things. Having my feet so that my weight is moving back and forth. I'm not like a big pendulum guy, but I do believe in putting yourself into a pendulum, especially in the beginning of early rounds, to set your rhythm with yourself. On top of that, these are all passive defense things. A slip, roll or anything like that, any deliberate action that you take to address a specific threat, that's active defense. Just having your hands up, keeping your head moving, and having good footwork, that's passive defense. All offense is inherently defensive. I got a typo there. And all defense is supplemental to offense. And so that's not to say that one's more important than the other, but one is specifically the tool to victory, and that's offense. Which is why I say it, that defense is supplemental to offense, because you can improve your offense. You can actually take your offense and put it into position to be victorious with your defense. However, you're not going to win the war with just defense, which is why all offense is inherently defensive, because it can help, it's going to be, they always say that the best defense is a good offense, and that's true, because you're going to be taking resources away from the enemy's ability to attack if you're attacking them. So that is, the offense is inherently defensive, but all defense is supplemental to offense, because it's not going to win the war. It's not going to win the fight. If all you do during a fight is have beautiful defense, but the other guy's still punching you, the judges are even just going to say, he's more aggressive. That guy wins. You don't want that. All right. Last two. I know this is a lot of information. Defense must not be static. And that's in war, that's in boxing, that's in anything. You don't want to just stand there like this, or like this, even worse, right? At the end of the day, these are going to be problems, because if you try to defend in a static position, you're not going to be able to transition well to offense. And again, managing transitions is its own set of principles that you need to be able to adhere to. And lastly, it is equally important to manage the transitions between offense and defense and back. So we often focus on offense, we often focus on defense, we focus on exchanges, but we don't talk about the management of the transitions. And at the end of the day, what do you think an exchange is? It's a transition where one of you is offending, the other is offending, and at some point somebody goes on the defensive, unless you just hit each other and neither one of you tries to protect yourselves, which is rare. You see it more in fencing than you do in boxing, because at the end of the day, you have instantaneous biomechanical feedback that says, hey, getting punched in the mouth sucks, and now I have a bloody lip or my tooth's loose. So you don't want that. Broken noses suck. So managing transitions is an equally important part of this whole process. We're going to talk about that tomorrow, but it is important to understand that as a principle of defense, that while you're defending, you need to be preparing for the onset of your offense. And if you're not, then you don't have a very good understanding of why you're defending. And I know these things do seem kind of strange to be talking about for boxing, but it's absolutely relevant. And the better your understanding of boxing gets, the more you'll start to see it. And, a perfect example of that is when an orthodox guy fights a southpaw. And I've brought this up in a couple other videos because it's important. Some coaches will say, well, you focus on the right hand because the right hand is the southpaw killer. Well, sure, the right hand is one of the tools that is the most effective for dispatching the southpaw, but that's not the thing that enables you to be able to defeat the southpaw. That's the tool you defeat the southpaw with. The thing that you actually need to have, or the skill or the awareness of, is your lead foot position. Your left foot needs to be on the outside of their right foot, which is their lead foot. And when you do that, now you've opened up three major important tools in your toolkit. You can effectively hit them with a jab, you can effectively hit them with your straight, and you can effectively use your lead hook. So the important thing is not the straight, but a lot of coaches will tell you that it is. No, the important thing is the dominant lead foot position, because that allows you to be able to use the straight and the other tools that come with having the dominant foot position. That's playing checkers versus playing chess. Playing checkers, I can throw my right hand. Playing chess is saying, hey, I need to put my foot in the right position that allows me to use my tools most effectively and most efficiently. Because remember, it's all about precision, consistency, rapidity. right? Those are going to be the traits when you apply those to your fundamentals that are going to help you be great at this. And that's all I'm here for. I'm not getting paid for this. I'm here because I've got 20 odd years I got 21, 22 almost years of experience doing this, and I want to give it to you. I teach. That's what I do. Like, my calling is to teach. So anyway, if you like my principles of defense, great. If you don't, I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments, because you always do. So thanks for watching. Have a great rest of your day.